the early Rogan days were fascinating because, you know, when you talk about Tosh doing radio, that was all we really understood. And Joe was not having it.
So when you tried to do bits, he would shut it down.
My first Rogan appearance, it would be cool to see a highlight reel of me trying to do bits on him. Because I was like, oh yeah, because I didn't know no one knew what a podcast was.
Right.
Especially the way Joe does it. So I would be interested to clip him out. I was like, I fought a bear one time, and he was like, what region was the bear from? And you're like, I don't know what region it was from. And he was like, well, wait, why would you? And it was like very thoughtful conversation. And then I realized within 20 minutes, this is not radio.
Yeah.
And so, and I realized that the best thing you could do is listen to Joe sometimes.
Yeah.
To try to respond to him.
Yeah.
It's why today I don't feel like I'm that great when I do Rogan, because it's a lot of it, I feel like I'm just catching up with a friend. And I don't know if it's entertaining as a podcast. I feel like you're just hanging out with your buddy.
Well, maybe that's the camaraderie people want. Maybe they're alone.
And maybe
they're working from home. They haven't seen anybody that day. And
it's what I used to love about it. I used to love it. So I get offered to do Rogan. I remember saying to Ari, because I didn't trust celebrities. I'd gotten in a fight with I'd gotten in beef with a comic, and I just didn't trust. And I said to Ari and Redman, I said, so, like, what's Joe's thing? Is he gay? And they're like, wait, what? I was like, I thought he was gay, because I was like, why would he want me to come to his house? And like, what's his deal? I'm like, no, he's just a great guy. I go, no. They all got something. What is it? And then they're like, no, he's just a good guy. He thinks you're funny. Like, do his podcast. So I go, oh, yeah. I thought everyone was gay. I thought Elliot Gould was gay. Will Smith. I thought Will Smith was gay. I thought anyone that wanted anyone that wanted to be friends with me, I just figured they were gay and they wanted to fuck me. Yeah. And so I literally was like, went to his house.
The most likable guy on the planet. You can't fathom that somebody's like, I'd like to just be around you and tell stories. They just want dick.
Yeah. But I was a fan of Joe's. I was like a legit fan of Joe's. Okay. And so I go out to his house. I do the worst thing you could ever do when you meet Joe. Now I know this.
Okay.
I go, hey man, huge fan. I want to meet your dogs. I want to see your deprivation tank. I want to get high. I want to play pool. And then we can do the podcast. And Joe is like, okay. So he takes me out and introduces his dogs. We get high. We play pool. Shows me his deprivation tank. Meet his wife. Meet his kids. Do a podcast. And I'm trying to do bits and it's not working. And then I'm like, okay. And then I just go into if he asks me a question, I'll respond to the question, which is like what we do now, but it just was not what happened in media. And so
I wish people knew what early radio days for comics were.
Oh.
Because what you're explaining makes so much sense, but
if
I
you've
don't
ever
know
watched
if they know.
Comics Unleashed,
where
the comics just go around and do their bits in a circle, that was radio. That
they
was what
tee you up with the premise of your joke.
I did Bob and Tom back in the day, and you had to write out your bits. You had to write them out.
Yeah.
And so I wrote out all my bits, and then you gave them to him. And they're like, so,
you ever go to Russia?
Yeah, I hear you. I'm married. Are you married, Bert? And you'd be like, ugh, here we go. And so, but it was Bob and Tom was fun back, and that was all you knew.
Yeah.
So, and this is Rogan. You do it in an office. I think he had a cat that would like take shits in the bathroom in the middle. It was in his office, and Joe was rich, but he wasn't Joe rich today.
Yeah.
Like Joe was like, and he would have you do this vlog after the podcast, which is so awkward. Like Brian will pull out his laptop and go, all right. And Joe's like, what's up? I just did a great podcast with Bert. So Bert, what's going on? And you'd be like, not much, Joe. It was so fucking bad. You can find those clips, I'm sure. And Joe had black facial hair and he still had hair. He still had hair, but he wore his hat backwards because whatever. And so you get done the podcast, and then he'd be like, you want to go get something to eat? And so, it was crazy. You know, he was also banned at the store at the time.
Yeah, that's right.
So, he would do shows at the Ice House. So then, the first time I do it, I think in my head, this is not what I thought it was going to be. I can't do bits here, but I do have this Russian mafia story that I bet would be good on this show. And so I go, hey man, next time I'm here, remind me to tell you the Russian mafia story. Like a week fucking later, he's like, hey, come tell the Russian mafia story. It's like, I'm sure I'm off on timelines, but I come back, I think a week later, and he's like, everyone's wondering about this Russian mafia story. And I tell it, and I gotta be honest with you, it bombed.
Yeah.
It sometimes I hope I'm not pulling the veil back too back. Sometimes Joe and Red Band would be fighting. And so you'd go in to do the podcast.
There'd be some tension.
And the whole thing would be them just, Joe being angry at Red Band because Red Band is saying buttholes and Olive Garden the whole time. And Joe's like, Brian, you got to realize people are fucking listening to this. And then you'd just be sitting off to the side, like watching them go back and forth and then be like, you guys want to try some Alpha Brain? And by the way, this is when Joe's launching Alpha Brain. This is when they're launching on it, right? So he'd give you his vitamins. He'd load you up with his vitamins, give you a fleshlight, and then be like, take those Alpha Brains, tell me what you think about them. And then you'd take them, and in a real scientific way, because they promoted, what's the, lucid dreaming. And so I'm an active lucid dreamer to begin with. And so you'd come back and he'd be like, so you took Alpha Brain? And this would be on the podcast. And he'd be like, yeah. And he'd go, so wait, what did you feel? Like the Joe analysis part of his brain. And he'd do that on the podcast about his own pills because he was trying to figure out if he liked them. And he was like, I love the Alpha Brain. I'm taking like 9 a day. I go, I took 1, Joe, I couldn't sleep. And he was like, no, what did you take? The cortisone mushrooms, the roll on, roll off, whatever the fuck. It was really interesting. And then the first time I did Rogan, I remember getting in the car and I had 3,000 Twitter followers extra. And I was like, wow. Second time I did Rogan, I told the machine story. And I went to the club and it was sold out, comped, but sold out. And then I watched it. And then the third time I did Rogan, I made a machine shirt. The machine shirt that I used to sell at shows. I got home to my house and Leanne goes, the fuck? We just sold $25,000 worth of t-shirts. She goes, I don't have those made. Woke up the next morning, she goes, we sold $90,000 worth of t-shirts in like 2 days. We had made 6 figures in those t-shirts by the end of the year, by like in 3 months. I think we did that, must have been in November. By the end of the year, we made 6 figures in those machine shirts. Joe wore it at a weigh-in. You'd see huge fucking spikes. I go to different countries. I remember I was in Amsterdam and they were yelling the machine in Amsterdam. And I was like, what the fuck? And then, so it's funny. You just get high and talk for 3 hours and not remember any of it at all. And it's crazy to see where he is today. And to, like I just did it the other day. And I'm like, it doesn't make sense to me that, I remember I did it one time and I got really fucked up. And I might have said that America created COVID or something. I don't know what I said. Who fucking knows what I said? They took the episode down and then put it up in 2 parts. And then they clipped out the thing I said. I don't know. I'm terrified to ask Joe because I know that there's some parts missing. And I was like, hey man, did I say some regrettable stuff on your podcast the other day? He was like, fuck it. Well, I'll say fucked up shit. Yeah, it was great, man. It's great. I'm bummed that you guys didn't get to experience that side of the show. Yeah. Because it was the fun when like Joey Diaz, like one of the hardest I ever laughed was Joey Diaz just rolled. I never met him. This is the opening words of meeting Joey Diaz. We used to do Death Squad nights at the Ice House where it was 5 comics on the podcast with Joe and we just do it and we'd do a show and so we'd hop on and off. So we'd go in to do a set and then come back to the podcast and everyone would be fucked up. And Joey Diaz comes in. I never met him and he's like, dog, you ever eat a woman's pussy on a Quaalude? And I was like, no. And he goes, Lucy Snorbush. And you ever break into someone's house and eat the pussy on a Quaalude? Lucy Snorbush. And we cried fucking laughing. And then I found out it's the hardest I've ever fucking laughed. And one of the top 5 hardest I've ever laughed. And Joe goes, you've never met Joey before? And I go, no. And he goes, well, you're about to be your best friend.